The storm had been raging for 3 days when Marcus Hawthorne heard the desperate pounding on his cabin door. Through the howling wind came a woman's voice, broken and pleading, "Please, don't let them take my baby." What he found on his doorstep that night would challenge everything he thought he knew about justice, family, and the lengths a person will go to protect what matters most. This is the story of how one mountain rancher's decision changed 3 lives forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Rocky Mountain peaks wore their winter crown heavy that October, snow falling in sheets that turned the world into a blank canvas of white and grey. Marcus Hawthorne pulled his collar tight against the wind as he made his final rounds of the evening, checking the barn doors and securing anything the storm might claim. His cattle huddled in the shelter he'd built along the valley's edge, their breath rising like small ghosts in the bitter air. The ranch stretched across 200 acres of some of the most unforgiving terrain in Colorado, carved from wilderness by his grandfather's hands 60 years before. 3 generations of Hawthorns had worked this land, fought its harsh seasons, and learned to read its moods like an old friend's face. Marcus knew every rock formation, every stand of pine, every creek that would freeze solid by December, and rush wild with snowmelt come spring. At 38, he lived alone in the log cabin his father had expanded, his grandfather had built. The original structure still stood at the heart of it, thick timber walls chinked with clay and determination. A stone chimney rose from the center, smoke curling now into the storm like a prayer. The windows glowed amber against the darkness, the only light for miles in any direction. Inside, the cabin held the comfortable chaos of a man who worked with his hands. Leather harnesses hung from wooden pegs. Books on cattle breeding and weather patterns lay stacked beside a worn Bible. The kitchen table bore the scars of countless meals eaten alone, knife marks from hasty food preparation, ring stains from coffee cups consumed while studying ledgers by lamplight. Marcus had married once, 7 years back. Sarah Mitchell had been the schoolteacher from the nearest town, 30 miles down the mountain. She'd loved the idea of ranch life until she lived it. The isolation wore on her first, then the endless work, the way weather dictated everything, how a sick calf could mean staying up all night in freezing rain. She'd left on a Tuesday morning in March, packed her things while he was checking the new calves. The note she left was kind but final. "Some people are meant for mountains, Marcus. I'm meant for places where the mail comes daily and neighbors live close enough to wave to." He'd respected her choice, even understood it. The mountain demanded everything from those who chose to stay. It gave back beauty, solitude, and a kind of peace that came from living in rhythm with something larger than human concerns. But it took as much as it gave. The wind picked up as he secured the last gate, driving snow horizontal across the valley. This storm had teeth. Weather reports from town predicted it would last through the weekend, maybe longer. Marcus had prepared, as mountain folk learned to do. His pantry held enough food for 2 weeks. The generator was fueled and ready. Firewood stood stacked 8 feet high against the cabin's north wall. He'd just reached the porch when he heard it, an engine struggling, somewhere in the darkness beyond his property line. The sound rose and fell with the wind, growing closer. Marcus stopped, hand on the cabin door, listening. No one came up this way during storm season. The road was barely passable in good weather, and the nearest neighbor lived 15 miles, east-south. The engine sputtered, coughed, then died somewhere near the edge of his land. Marcus waited, listening to the storm, wondering if he'd imagined it. Then came the sound of a car door slamming, distant but definite. Someone was out there in this weather. He grabbed his heavy coat and the powerful flashlight from the hook by the door. The beam cut through the snow as he made his way toward the sound, following the fence line that marked his property. His boots crunched through snow already ankle-deep and falling faster. The car sat tilted in the ditch, where the mountain road curved too sharply for anyone unfamiliar with its tricks. It was an old sedan, city car not meant for mountain driving. Steam rising from under its crumpled hood. The driver's door hung open, snow already accumulating on the seat inside. Marcus called out, voice nearly lost in the wind. "Hello? Anyone hurt?" Movement caught his eye near a stand of pine trees. A figure stumbled through the snow, small and hunched against the storm. As his flashlight found them, Marcus saw it was a woman carrying something bundled against her chest. She turned toward the light, and he saw her face clearly for the first time. Young, maybe mid-20s, with dark hair plastered to her head by snow and tears frozen on her cheeks. But it was her eyes that stopped him, wild with fear and desperation, the look of something cornered. "Please," she called out, voice breaking, "please help us." Marcus moved closer, careful not to startle her. The bundle in her arms shifted, and he heard it then, the soft cry of an infant. "Ma'am, you need to get out of this weather," he said, gentle but firm. "My cabin's just up the hill. We can sort everything else out once you're warm." She shook her head frantically. "They'll find us. They'll take him. I can't let them take my baby." "Who's going to take your baby?" "Social services. My ex-husband, everyone." Her voice cracked on the words. "They think I'm not fit. But I love him. He's all I have left." The infant cried louder, the sound thin in the cold air. Marcus could see the woman swaying on her feet, exhaustion and cold taking their toll. Whatever had brought her up this mountain in the middle of a storm, she was at the end of her strength. "What's your name?" he asked. "Elena," she whispered. "Elena Rodriguez. I'm Marcus. And right now, Elena, the only thing that matters is getting you and your baby somewhere warm. Everything else can wait." She stared at him through the snow, searching his face for something. Trust, maybe, or at least the absence of threat. The baby's cries grew more urgent, and something in that sound seemed to decide her. "Okay," she said finally, "but if anyone comes looking, we'll deal with that when it happens." The walk back to the cabin felt longer than it was, fighting wind that seemed determined to push them back down the mountain. Elena stumbled twice, and Marcus found himself walking close beside her, ready to catch her if she fell. The baby had gone quiet, wrapped tight in blankets that looked hand-knitted. Inside the cabin, warmth hit them like a physical thing. Elena stood dripping snow onto the wooden floor, still clutching the infant, still looking around like she expected threats to emerge from the shadows. "Sit by the fire," Marcus said, adding logs to the hearth. "I'll get you some dry clothes and something hot to drink." He rummaged through the chest where he kept extra clothing, finding a flannel shirt and wool socks that would dwarf her but provide warmth. When he turned back, Elena had sunk into the chair nearest the fire, finally allowing herself to loosen her grip on the bundle in her arms. The baby was perhaps 6 months old, with dark hair and solemn eyes that seemed too old for his small face. He looked healthy enough, though thin, and his clothes were clean despite their journey through the storm. "What's his name?" Marcus asked, settling into the opposite chair with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. "Gabriel," Elena said, voice soft now. "Gabriel Rodriguez." "That's a strong name." She managed a small smile, the first he'd seen from her. "My grandmother's choice. She said it meant God is my strength." Marcus nodded. "Seems fitting." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the fire crackle and the wind howl outside. Gabriel had settled into sleep, exhausted by his ordeal. Eleanor's grip on him relaxed slightly, though she never fully let her guard down. "How long since you've eaten?" Marcus asked. Elena's cheeks flushed. "This morning, I think. Maybe yesterday morning. It's hard to remember." Marcus rose and moved to the kitchen area, pulling supplies from cupboards. "I've got soup that'll be ready in 10 minutes, bread that's only a day old. Nothing fancy, but it'll fill the holes. As he worked, he caught glimpses of Elena in his peripheral vision. She kept looking toward the windows, starting at every sound the wind made against the glass. Whatever had driven her up this mountain, she was running from something that had her genuinely terrified. The soup was simple, beef and vegetables from his own garden, canned last summer. But the smell filled the cabin with comfort, and he saw Elena's shoulders relax slightly as the warmth and safety began to penetrate her exhaustion. When he set the bowl in front of her, she looked up with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know how to repay this kindness." "No need for repayment. Mountain law says you help folks who need helping." She ate slowly at first, then with growing hunger, one arm still cradling Gabriel. Marcus busied himself cleaning up, giving her space to eat without feeling watched. "The car," she said eventually. "I'll need to—" "The car's not going anywhere tonight, maybe not for several days, depending on how long this storm lasts." Fear flashed across her face again. "But they might—" "Eleanor." His voice was gentle but firm. "Nobody's driving up that mountain tonight. The road's already impassable, and it's getting worse. You're safe here." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She nodded, though he could see the worry still eating at her. Gabriel stirred in her arms, making small sounds that weren't quite crying, but weren't contentment either. "He's probably hungry too," she said, looking uncertain. Marcus realized the complexity of her situation was deeper than he'd first understood. A young mother, alone with an infant, running from something serious enough to risk their lives in. A mountain storm, no supplies visible, no diaper bag, nothing but the clothes on their backs and her fierce determination to protect her child. "I've got some things in the pantry," he said. Might be able to improvise something for him. Her relief was visible. "I ran out of formulas yesterday. I've been trying to nurse, but I'm stressed. It makes it difficult." Marcus had helped with enough ranch animals to understand the basics of feeding young things. He found powdered milk, mixed it carefully, and tested the temperature. Gabriel took the bottle eagerly, small hands grasping at the warmth. As the baby fed, Elena's story began to emerge in fragments. An abusive husband she'd finally found the courage to leave. A custody battle that had turned ugly when she documented his violence. Social services were involved, but her ex-husband's family had money, connections, lawyers who knew how to make her look unstable. "I was staying with my aunt in Denver," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "But his private investigator found us. I woke up this morning to see a car parked across the street, a man inside just watching. I knew they were coming for Gabriel. So you ran." "I took everything I could carry and drove. I didn't have a plan. I just knew I had to get away from the city, somewhere they couldn't find us." She looked around the cabin. "I didn't expect to end up here." Marcus fed more logs to the fire, watching the flames dance. Outside, the storm raged with no sign of letting up. In the warm circle of firelight, with Gabriel feeding contentedly and Elena finally allowing herself to rest, it was easy to forget the harsh realities waiting beyond these walls. "How long since you've slept?" he asked. Elena's laugh was bitter. "Really slept? Weeks, months maybe. You don't sleep when you're always listening for footsteps, always checking the locks." Marcus understood something about sleepless nights, though he came from different demons. "The bedroom's yours tonight. I'll take the couch." "I can't ask you." "You're not asking. I'm offering." She studied his face in the firelight, and he let her look, understanding her need to assess, to determine if he represented safety or another kind of threat. Whatever she saw there seemed to reassure her. "Thank you," she said finally, "for all of this, for not asking too many questions. Questions can wait. Sleep can't." Gabriel had finished eating and drifted back to sleep, small body relaxed in a way that spoke of temporary safety. Elena held him close, her own eyes heavy with exhaustion. She'd been fighting for too long. Marcus showed her to the bedroom, gave her extra blankets, and checked that the window latches were secure. More from habit than any real concern about intruders. The storm would keep anyone away until morning at least. Back in the main room, he banked the fire and settled onto the couch with a quilt his grandmother had made. The wind continued its assault on the cabin, but the solid walls held firm as they had for decades. As he lay in the darkness, Marcus found himself thinking about the woman and child sleeping in his bedroom. Elena's fear was real, bone deep, the kind that came from experiencing genuine threat. And Gabriel, there was something about holding that sleeping infant, seeing his small face relaxed in trust, that had stirred feelings Marcus thought he'd buried with his failed marriage. Done. Mountain had brought them to his door for a reason. He'd learned to trust the mountain's wisdom, even when he didn't understand it. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight they were safe. Sometimes that was enough to build everything else upon. Dawn came slow through the storm clouds, more a lessening of darkness than true light. Marcus woke to the sound of Gabriel crying, muffled through the bedroom door, but insistent. He lay still for a moment, listening. Elena's voice followed, soft and soothing, the universal language of mothers comforting their children. The fire had burned down to embers during the night. Marcus added kindling, coaxed flames back to life, then started coffee while the cabin warmed. Snow continued falling outside, though not with the fury of the previous evening. Through the kitchen window, he could see his cattle gathered in the shelter, patient and waiting. Elena emerged from the bedroom, looking like she'd actually slept, though her clothes were wrinkled and her dark hair tangled. Gabriel rode on her, hip, wide awake and studying his surroundings with curious eyes. "Coffee?" Marcus offered. "Please." She settled at the kitchen table, adjusting Gabriel so he could see around the room. "I hope his crying didn't wake you." "Been up before dawn most. Of my life comes with the territory." Marcus poured coffee into 2 mugs, added cream to hers without asking. Something about the way she'd taken it the night before. Small observations were second nature when you lived alone. You noticed how people preferred things. Storms letting up some, he said, nodding toward the window. Elena's expression tightened. "Does that mean the roads?" "Still impassable. Won't be clear for days, maybe a week if we get more snow." He sat across from her. "Road crews don't prioritize up here. We're on our own until the weather breaks." Relief flickered across her face, followed immediately by guilt. "I shouldn't be glad about being stranded. Sometimes being stuck is exactly what we need." Gabriel reached for the salt shaker on the table, small fingers grasping. Elena intercepted, his hand gently, redirecting his attention to a wooden spoon Marcus had left within reach. The baby gummed it contentedly, drool pooling on the scarred table surface. "He's teething," Elena explained. "Everything goes in his mouth these days." Marcus watched the interaction, noting how naturally Elena anticipated Gabriel's needs, how her whole body stayed tuned to his smallest movements. Whatever challenges she faced as a mother, attentiveness wasn't one of them. "How old is he exactly?" 7 months next week. Her voice carried pride mixed with worry. "He was early, spent. His first month in the NICU. That's when everything started falling apart with David, my ex-husband." Marcus waited, sensing there was more she needed to say. David couldn't handle it. The uncertainty, the medical bills, having to actually be present for someone else's needs. Elena's fingers traced patterns on the table. He started staying. Out later, drinking more, blaming me for Gabriel's complications. And when Gabriel got better, David got worse, said I was obsessed with the baby, that I'd changed, that I loved Gabriel more than him. Elena's laugh was hollow. As if that was somehow wrong. Gabriel dropped the spoon, and it clattered to the floor. Marcus retrieved it, rinsed it at the sink, and handed it back. The simple gesture seemed to surprise Elena. "Most people would have just left it there," she said. "Most people don't live alone, with only themselves to clean up after." She smiled at that, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. It transformed her face, chasing away some of the haunted look that had clung to her since arrival. "Tell me about this place," she said. "It feels like it's been here forever." Marcus refilled their coffee cups, settling back into his chair. "Third generation Hawthorne Ranch. My grandfather homesteaded here in 1960, cleared most of the land by hand. My father expanded it, modernized what could be modernized without losing what made it work. And you? I've been trying to figure out what my contribution is supposed to be." Marcus gestured toward the window. "The land teaches you patience. If nothing else, sometimes the answer takes time to reveal itself." Gabriel had grown restless in Elena's arms, pushing against her chest and babbling sounds that might have been attempts at words. Elena stood, swaying gently as she walked him around the main room. "He's not used to staying still this long," she explained. "Back in Denver, we walked everywhere. He liked the movement, the sounds of the city. Different kinds of stimulation up here? Everything's different here." Elena paused by the mantelpiece, studying the photographs displayed there. "This was your wife?" Marcus joined her, looking at the framed photo of Sarah on their wedding day. Young faces, hopeful smiles, mountain peaks in the background. "Ex-wife, Sarah. She's a teacher down in Boulder now, remarried to an accountant who works regular hours and comes home every night at 6. "Do you regret it? The divorce?" Marcus considered the question. "I regret that we wanted different things, and took too long to admit it, but I don't regret that she's happy now." Elena adjusted Gabriel, who had become fascinated with the brass clock on the mantel. "That's very mature of you." "It took a while to get there. Spent the first year after she left pretty angry at everything. Her, the mountain, myself, for thinking. Love was enough to bridge the gap between what people need. Love isn't enough. Love's the foundation, but you need compatible dreams to build on it." Gabriel reached for the clock, and Elena moved him away from the fragile antique. "What about children? Did you and Sarah ever—" She wanted to wait until we had more financial security. I kept thinking about next year, then she was gone and next year never came. The admission hung in the air between them. Elena's expression softened with understanding. "I'm sorry. Life takes the turns it takes. Can't spend forever looking backward." Gabriel had begun fussing in earnest now, the kind of building cry that warned of a full breakdown approaching. Elena bounced him gently, but he wasn't having it. "He's hungry again," she said, "but he finished the formula you made last night." Marcus moved to the pantry, taking inventory. "I've got more powdered milk, some baby cereal that might work. My sister visits sometimes with her kids. I keep supplies on hand." "You have a sister?" "Had. Cancer took her 3 years ago, but her kids still come up in the summers to help with the ranch work." Marcus measured formula carefully, testing temperature on his wrist like he'd seen Elena do. "They're teenagers now, but they leave things behind. The habit of keeping them, I suppose." Gabriel calmed as soon as he saw the bottle, small hands reaching eagerly. Elena settled into the rocking chair by the fire, and Marcus was struck by how natural the scene looked. Woman and child in his home, morning light filtering through storm clouds, the quiet domestic rhythm he'd convinced himself he didn't miss. "Your sister's children, do they know about—" Elena gestured vaguely, indicating his solitary life. "They know I'm their uncle, who lives on a mountain and teaches them to ride horses. That's enough for now." Elena watched Gabriel drink, her expression thoughtful. "Do you think it's selfish? Wanting to raise a child away from everything? Family, community, stability? The question carried weight beyond casual conversation. Marcus recognized it as the real question, the one that had driven her up this mountain in the middle of a storm. "Depends on what you're keeping them away from," he said carefully. "David's family has money, connections. They can give Gabriel private schools, college funds, opportunities I'll never be able to provide on a teacher's salary." "What is the court case about?" Elena nodded, tears threatening. "David's lawyers paint me as unstable, selfish for leaving their son, unable to provide proper care. They have witnesses who say I'm obsessive about Gabriel's health, that I don't let him out of my sight. And their definition of proper care: nannies, boarding schools, summer camps that build character, love scheduled around business meetings." Elena's voice hardened. David missed Gabriel's first word, his first steps, his first tooth. But somehow, I'm an inadequate parent. Gabriel had finished eating and was fighting sleep, eyelids heavy but determination keeping him awake. Elena shifted him to her shoulder, rubbing gentle circles on his back. "Courts like stability," Marcus said. "Two-parent homes, steady income, conventional arrangements. Everything I can't provide. Maybe not everything." Elena looked up at him, questioning. "Gabriel seems pretty bonded to you. Happy, healthy despite everything you've been through. That counts for something." "Not enough, apparently." Gabriel finally surrendered to sleep, small body relaxing completely against his mother's chest. Elena continued the gentle back-rubbing, more for her own comfort now than his. "There's something else," she said quietly. "The private investigator David hired, he found my aunt's address somehow, but he also found out about my grandmother's place." "Your grandmother?" "She left me a cabin in Oregon when she died last year. Remote, off-grid, but legally mine. I'd been planning to take Gabriel there, start over somewhere David could never find us." Marcus felt pieces clicking into place. "But your car broke down. Transmission gave out just as I reached your mountain. Everything I own is in that car, clothes, documents, the deed to grandmother's cabin." Elena's voice cracked. "I put everything into this escape plan and now I'm trapped." The storm outside had indeed lessened, but snow continued falling steadily. Marcus calculated time and distance, weather patterns and road conditions. Even when the storm passed, her car would need major repairs, and those took time to arrange this far from civilization. "How long before they expect you back in Denver?" "I missed a court-mandated meeting yesterday. They'll issue a warrant soon, probably already." Elena lifted Gabriel slightly, breathing in his baby scent like it might be the last time. "I know how this looks, running away with my child, defying court orders. But you don't understand what David is capable of. Tell me." Elena was quiet for so long Marcus thought she wouldn't answer. Gabriel slept peacefully, unaware of the adult fears surrounding him. "He never hit Gabriel," she said finally. "Never hit me where it would show, but he had other ways of maintaining control. Financial abuse, emotional manipulation, threats about what would happen if I ever left." "What kind of threats?" "That he'd make sure I never saw Gabriel again. That he'd prove I was an unfit mother. That his family's lawyers would destroy me in court." Elena's voice dropped to a whisper. "Those accidents could happen to people who didn't know their place." Marcus felt anger rise in his chest, the kind of cold fury that came from hearing about stronger people preying on weaker ones. He'd seen it with animals, predators who targeted the vulnerable. It was just as ugly in human form. "You believe he'd follow through?" "I believe he enjoys having power over others. Gabriel and I represented the ultimate power trip, complete dependence, total control over our lives." Gabriel stirred slightly, making small sleeping sounds. Eleanor's arms tightened protectively around him. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm being paranoid. If maybe his family is right and I am obsessive, overprotective." Elena looked up at Marcus. "But then I remember the way he looked at Gabriel during those last weeks before I left. like he was calculating the child's value, figuring out how to use him as leverage. Marcus moved to the window, studying the continuing snowfall. The storm would provide cover for now, but weather was temporary. Eventually, decisions would need to be made. "Oregon's a long way from Colorado courts," he said. "Grandmother's cabin is completely off-grid. No address, no utilities in my name. It would buy me time to establish residency, maybe find work, prove I can provide stability. And if they find you there?" Elena's silence was enough. Marcus turned back to face her. "This grandmother of yours, what was she like?" A real smile crossed Elena's face. "Independent, stubborn. She homesteaded that Oregon cabin in the 1970s. Lived there alone for 40 years. Taught me that a woman could make her own way in the world, that sometimes the best protection was distance from people who meant you harm. Sounds like she raised you right. She tried. I just wish I'd been brave enough to listen sooner." Gabriel woke with a start, small arms flailing as he oriented himself. Elena soothed him with practiced movements, her attention immediately focused on his needs. "He's going to need a diaper change soon," she said, "and I only have 2 left." Marcus made a mental note to add that to his growing list of supplies to acquire somehow. Caring for an infant required resources he'd never had to consider. "We'll figure it out," he said. "One problem at a time." Elena looked at him with something approaching. "Hope you keep saying we." Marcus hadn't realized he'd been doing it. The word had slipped out naturally, as if somewhere in the past 12 hours he'd stopped thinking of Elena and Gabriel as temporary visitors and started seeing them as his responsibility. "Figure of speech," he said, though they both knew it was more than that. Outside, the wind was picking up again, driving snow against the windows with renewed force. The storm was far from over. Whatever decisions lay ahead would have to wait. For now, they had warmth, shelter, and each other. Sometimes, Marcus reflected, that was how the most important things began, not with grand plans or careful preparation, but with simple presence in the face of uncertainty. The mountain had taught him patience. Today, it seemed, patience would serve them all. The 3rd day brought a deceptive calm. Snow fell lighter now, in lazy spirals that caught the morning light like dancing sugar. Marcus stood at the kitchen sink, washing Gabriel's bottles and watching Elena through the window as she explored the area around the cabin with the baby bundled against her chest. She moved carefully through the snow, pointing out things to Gabriel, the icicles hanging from the barn eaves, the way his breath made clouds in the cold air, the tracks rabbits had left in the fresh powder. Her voice carried on the still air, soft and musical, teaching him words he was too young to understand, but old enough to absorb. The domesticity of it struck Marcus unexpectedly. How easily the rhythm of caring for them had settled into his morning. Routine, coffee for 2 adults instead of 1. Extra portions at meals. The sound of Gabriel's babbling filling spaces that had been silent for too long. Elena appeared at the kitchen door, stamping snow from her boots. Gabriel's cheeks were pink with cold, his eyes bright and alert. "The barn," she said, unwrapping the baby from his outer blankets. "Is it warm enough for him to see the animals?" Marcus dried his hands on a dish towel. "With the right layers. Cattle generate heat, and I've got a space heater running. I want him to experience this," Elena said, settling Gabriel in the makeshift high chair Marcus had constructed from a regular chair and careful positioning of cushions. The mountains, the animals, the way life works when it's connected to the land, different from city life. Everything about this is different. Elena spooned cereal into Gabriel's mouth, catching the overflow with practiced efficiency. Back in Denver, our world was so small, apartment to daycare, to grocery store, to doctor appointments, the same route every day, the same sterile environments. Gabriel grabbed for the spoon, managing to fling cereal across the table. Instead of frustration, Elena laughed, the first truly carefree sound Marcus had heard from her. "He's decided he can feed himself," she explained, handing Gabriel a piece of soft bread to gum. "Independence starts early." Marcus cleaned the cereal from the table, noting how different Elena seemed when she wasn't looking over her shoulder for threats. The constant tension had eased from her posture. She moved more freely, spoke without the careful calculation that had marked her first day. "Here, what was Gabriel like as a newborn?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious. Elena's expression softened with memory. "Tiny. So incredibly tiny, but fierce. The NICU nurses said they'd never seen a preemie fight so hard to breathe, to eat, to grow. He had this way of gripping your finger that made you believe he was going to be okay, even when the machines said otherwise." "And David during all that?" The lightness faded from Elena's face. "David saw the medical bills, the time away from work, the way it disrupted his plans for the perfect family." She paused, wiping Gabriel's face with gentle strokes. "He started talking about cutting losses when Gabriel was 3 weeks old." Marcus felt that cold anger again, about his own son. David never saw Gabriel as his son, more like a disappointing investment that wasn't performing as expected. Gabriel had finished eating and was making demanding noises toward the window, clearly wanting to go back outside. Eleanor looked to Marcus questioningly. "Barn tour it is," Marcus said, "but we bundle him up right." The process of preparing Gabriel for cold weather took 20 minutes, layers upon layers, each one checked and adjusted until the baby resembled a small, indignant marshmallow. Elena fussed over every detail, while Gabriel tolerated the attention with the patient expression of someone accustomed to being thoroughly cared for. The barn was indeed warmer than outside, heated by the presence of 12 head of cattle and Marcus's space heater. The animals looked up with mild interest as the humans entered, then returned to their hay with bovine indifference. Gabriel's reaction was immediate and delighted. He strained against Elena's hold, reaching toward the nearest cow with grabbing hands and excited babbling. "Big, aren't they?" Elena murmured to him. "Much bigger than the pictures in your books." Marcus approached the gentlest of his herd, a 7-year-old Angus cow named Bessie. "This one's safe," he said. "Raised her from a calf. She's seen enough. Visitors to no babies aren't threats." He guided Elena closer until Gabriel could actually touch the cow's flank. The baby's eyes went wide with wonder, small fingers patting the coarse hair with surprising gentleness. "Moo," Eleanor said softly, and Gabriel turned to look at her with an expression of pure amazement, as if she'd just revealed a profound secret. Marcus found himself smiling at the interaction. He's never seen livestock before? Denver's not exactly our cattle country. The closest he's come to farm animals is picture books and stuffed toys. Gabriel had discovered that patting the cow produced a sound and was now experimenting with different pressures and rhythms. Bessie bore the attention with maternal patience, occasionally shifting her weight, but otherwise unbothered by her small admirer. "She likes him," Marcus observed. "How can you tell? Ear position mostly. When cattle are relaxed around something, their ears stay forward and loose. When they're nervous, their ears go back." Elena studied Bessie's ears with new interest. "There's so much I don't know about this kind of life. Everyone starts somewhere. My grandfather came from Chicago, didn't know a heifer from a bull when he first arrived. But he learned. Had to. The mountain doesn't give you much choice. Adapt or leave." Gabriel had moved on from patting to attempting to grab handfuls of cow hair. Bessie turned her massive head to look at him, and for a moment, baby and bovine regarded each other with mutual curiosity. "I think she's wondering what kind of strange calf you are," Marcus told Gabriel, who responded with a burst of delighted laughter. The sound echoed through the barn, pure and joyful. Elena's eyes filled with tears, and she quickly blinked away. He hasn't laughed like that in weeks, she said quietly. Real laughter, not just smiling because adults expect it. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a recognition he wasn't entirely ready to name. Stress affects children, even babies. I keep telling myself I'm protecting him by running, but what if I'm just passing my fear along to him? What if David's right, and I am hurting Gabriel by being so afraid? The question hung in the warm air of the barn. Gabriel had lost interest in the cow and was now fascinated by a barn cat that had appeared to investigate the visitors. Fear's not always wrong, Marcus said carefully. Sometimes it's the thing that keeps you alive long enough to find safety. Eleanor shifted Gabriel to her other hip, allowing him a better view of the cat. But how do you know when it's protecting you versus when it's controlling you? Marcus considered the question, watching Gabriel's delight as the cat approached close, enough to sniff his extended hand. Maybe it's about what the fear drives you toward. Running towards safety's different from just running away. Is that what I'm doing? Running towards safety? What does this feel like to you? Elena looked around the barn, at the patient cattle, the curious cat now rubbing against her legs, Gabriel's continued wonderment at his surroundings. It feels like breathing for the first time in months. Gabriel had begun making insistent noises toward the barn door, clearly ready for the next adventure. Elena laughed and headed for the exit. He's never satisfied with just one new experience, she explained. Always wants to see what's around the next corner. Back at the cabin, Elena settled Gabriel for his afternoon nap while Marcus worked on equipment maintenance at the kitchen table. The domestic scene felt surprisingly natural. The quiet sounds of a baby settling to sleep, Elena humming softly in the bedroom, tools and leather spread across scarred wood. When Elena emerged from the bedroom, she moved quietly to avoid waking Gabriel. He went down easily. All that fresh air tired him out. She joined Marcus at the table, watching him repair a bridle with careful stitches. You do beautiful work. Necessity. Can't afford to replace equipment every time something breaks. Elena traced a finger along one of his finished repairs, noting the precision of the stitching. My grandmother taught me to sew, but nothing like this. This is art. Just problem solving. Don't diminish it. There's something beautiful about making things last, about fixing instead of discarding. Marcus paused in his work, considering her words. Your ex-husband wasn't much for fixing things, I take it. Elena's expression darkened. David's philosophy was replaced. Easier to buy new than invest time in repair. He applied that to everything. Cars, appliances, relationships. People, especially people. When Gabriel didn't develop on the timeline David expected, when I didn't bounce back from childbirth fast enough, when the whole experience of parenthood didn't match his fantasy, we became problems to be solved, rather than people to be supported. Marcus resumed his stitching, letting the rhythm of the work calm his anger. Why did you finally leave? I left when I realized he was looking at Gabriel the same way he'd started looking at me, like damaged goods that were becoming too expensive to maintain. Gabriel's soft crying drifted from the bedroom, not distressed, just waking up and wanting company. Elena rose to get him, and Marcus found himself listening to her quiet voice as she talked the baby through his transition from sleep to wakefulness. She returned with Gabriel on her hip, his hair sticking up at impossible angles and his face creased from sleep. Someone had a good nap, Marcus said, and Gabriel turned toward his voice with a smile that seemed to light up the entire cabin. He likes you, Elena observed. He's usually shy with new people. Maybe he knows I'm not going anywhere. The words slipped out before Marcus could consider their implications. Elena's expression shifted, hope and uncertainty warring across her features. What do you mean? Marcus set down his leather work, meeting her eyes directly. I mean, whatever's coming. Next, you don't have to face it alone. Marcus, you don't understand what you're offering. If David's people find us here, if there are legal consequences, let me worry about that. You could lose everything. This ranch, your reputation, your freedom, if they decide you're helping a fugitive. Gabriel had wriggled down from Elena's arms and was now exploring the kitchen area, opening cabinets and investigating their contents with the thorough determination of a tiny scientist. Some things are worth the risk, Marcus said quietly. Elena sank into a chair, overwhelmed. Why? You don't even know us. Marcus watched Gabriel discover a pot lid, banging it experimentally against the cabinet door with obvious delight. I know. You love that boy enough to risk everything for his safety. I know you're teaching him to be gentle with animals and curious about the world. I know you're stronger than you think you are. Those aren't reasons to upend your life for strangers. Maybe not. Marcus retrieved his leather work, but his attention remained on Elena. But I spent 2 years rattling around this place alone, telling myself I was content with solitude. Then you showed up, and suddenly the silence feels empty instead of peaceful. Gabriel had discovered that the pot lid made different sounds depending on what he hit with it. He was now conducting a thorough acoustic survey of the kitchen, his face serious with concentration. He's going to need so much, Elena said quietly. Diapers, clothes, formula, medical care, and if we're hiding, we'll figure it out, one day at a time. Elena's eyes filled again, but this time she didn't look away. I'm scared. Is David finding you? Of believing this could work, of letting Gabriel get attached to this place, to you, and then having to leave. Marcus stood, moving to where Gabriel was now attempting to stack measuring cups inside each other. He knelt down to the baby's level, helping him fit the cups together properly. Gabriel looked up at him with complete trust, small hands reaching to pat Marcus's beard. What if you didn't have to leave? Marcus asked, still looking at Gabriel, but speaking to Elena. That's not realistic. Eventually, what if we made it realistic? Elena stared at him. What are you suggesting? Marcus lifted Gabriel, who immediately began exploring his shirt pocket with busy fingers. I'm suggesting we stop thinking about this as temporary. Start thinking about solutions instead of problems. Marcus, hear me out. He settled Gabriel on his lap, where the baby continued his investigation of pockets and buttons. You need legal protection, distance from your ex-husband's influence, a stable environment to raise Gabriel. And you need it? Marcus looked down at Gabriel, who had discovered a pen in his pocket and was now examining it with the intensity of an archaeologist studying ancient artifacts. I need what every person needs. Family, purpose, the sound of laughter in my home. Elena's voice was barely a whisper. You're talking about marriage. I'm talking about partnership. Legal protection for you and Gabriel, a father figure who won't see him as damaged goods, a life built around what matters instead of what looks good from the outside. Gabriel had managed to uncap the pen and was now decorating Marcus's shirt with blue ink marks. Marcus didn't seem to notice. A marriage of convenience, Elena said. Does it matter what we call it as long as it works? Elena was quiet for a long time, watching Gabriel and Marcus together. The baby had abandoned the pen in favor of playing with Marcus's beard, giggling every time the whiskers tickled his palm. It would have to be real, she said finally, legally binding, permanent on paper. Otherwise, David's lawyers would tear it apart. I understand. And Gabriel would have to be adopted. Legally yours as much as mine. Marcus met her eyes over Gabriel's head. I'd want that anyway. You don't know what you're saying. Raising a child, especially one who might need extra medical attention. Elena. Marcus's voice was gentle but firm. I'm not David. I don't see Gabriel as a problem to be solved. I see him as a gift that showed up in a snowstorm. Gabriel had tired of beard exploration. and was now demanding to be put down to continue his kitchen survey. Marcus lowered him to the floor, where he immediately crawled toward Elena with determined purpose. "Mama," Gabriel said clearly, reaching up to be lifted. It was his first real word, spoken with perfect timing and absolute clarity. Elena scooped him up, tears streaming down her face. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. "He said mama." Marcus smiled. "Good timing, buddy," Gabriel pleased. With the reaction his new word had generated, repeated it several times with increasing volume and satisfaction. "Mama, mama, mama." Elena held him close, looking at Marcus over the baby's head. "If we did this, if we actually went through with it, what would you want from me?" "Honesty. Partnership in running this place. Help raise Gabriel to be the kind of man the world needs more of. And if David fights it, if he brings lawyers and investigators and makes our lives hell." Marcus stood, moving to the window where afternoon light was beginning to fade. "Then he'll discover that mountain folk don't intimidate easily, and that some battles are worth fighting regardless of the cost." Gabriel had settled against Elena's shoulder, sleepy again from all his exploration. She rocked him gently, her expression thoughtful. "It's crazy," she said. "The best things usually are. We barely know each other. We know what matters. We both put Gabriel's welfare first. We both believe in fixing things instead of throwing them away. We both understand that the most important battles aren't always the easiest ones." Eleanor looked around the cabin, at the solid walls, the warm fire, the evidence of a life built with careful attention to what lasted. Then she looked at Marcus, this man who had opened his door to strangers in a storm and somehow managed to open his heart as well. "I need time to think," she said. "You have it. The storm's not clearing any time soon." But even as he said it, Marcus could see the weather beginning to change outside. The wind was shifting and the snow was falling lighter. Time, like winter storms, was a temporary gift. They had tonight, maybe tomorrow. Then the real world would come calling, and decisions would need to be made. For now, though, they had Gabriel's first word echoing in the warm cabin air, and the beginning of something that might just be strong enough to weather whatever storms lay ahead. The fourth morning broke crisp and clear, the storm finally exhausted. Sunlight streamed through the cabin windows for the first time since Elena's arrival, turning the snow-covered landscape into a brilliance that made them all squint. Marcus stood at the kitchen window, coffee mug in hand, watching his cattle venture out of the shelter to investigate the transformed world. Behind him, Elena fed Gabriel breakfast while humming a Spanish lullaby her grandmother had sung to her. The sound filled the cabin with warmth that had nothing to do with the fire crackling in the hearth. Gabriel responded to the melody by kicking his feet and waving his spoon, sending oatmeal flying in artistic arcs across the table. "Your grandmother sang to you in Spanish?" Marcus asked, turning from the window. "Every morning while she braided my hair," Eleanor replied, capturing Gabriel's spoon before he could launch another volley of breakfast. "She said music was the first language, that babies understood melody before they understood words. Seems to be working." Marcus nodded toward Gabriel, who was now attempting to sing along with Elena's humming, producing sounds that were more enthusiastic than melodic. Elena smiled, wiping oatmeal from Gabriel's chin. She also said that children who grew up with music grew up knowing that beauty could exist even in difficult times. The radio on Marcus's kitchen counter crackled to life. The morning weather report from the station down in Pine Ridge, 40 miles south. Marcus had been monitoring it since the storm began, tracking its progress and waiting for road condition updates. Highway 34 remains closed between Miller's Junction and the high country due to avalanche danger. County Road 15 is open with chains required. Residents in remote areas should continue to shelter in place until crews can assess. Marcus lowered the volume, but kept the radio on. Elena's attention had shifted from Gabriel to the broadcast, her expression tightening with each word. "Roads are clearing," she said quietly. "Some roads. The main highway to my place won't be passable for days yet. But other routes?" Marcus hesitated. Truth was, someone determined enough could reach his ranch now if they knew the back roads and had the right equipment. Possibly. Elena's hands stilled on Gabriel's bib. "They could be coming." "Elena, no, you don't understand." She lifted Gabriel from his improvised high chair, holding him against her chest like a shield. "David's private investigator. He specializes in finding people who don't want to be found. If my car's been discovered, if someone reported seeing us." Gabriel sensed his mother's tension and began fussing, small hands grasping at her shirt. Elena bounced him automatically, but her eyes remained fixed on the radio as if it might announce her doom at any moment. Marcus moved to her side. "Even if they tracked you this far, there are dozens of ranches scattered through these mountains. Finding the right one would take time. You don't know these people. They have resources, connections. David's father owns half the politicians in Colorado." Gabriel's fussing escalated to crying, picking up on the fear radiating from his mother. Elena tried to soothe him, but her own agitation made comfort impossible. "Here," Marcus said gently, extending his arms. "Let me take him while you catch your breath." Elena hesitated, then transferred Gabriel to Marcus's embrace. The baby's crying subsided to hiccups, though he continued to watch his mother with worried eyes. "We need a plan," Elena said, pacing to the window and back. "If they come here, if they find us, then we deal with it. You keep saying that, but you don't understand what we're up against." Eleanor's voice rose with panic. "David's family has private security, lawyers who specialize in custody cases, investigators who know how to make evidence disappear." Gabriel had calmed in Marcus's arms, but continued tracking his mother's movement with his gaze. Marcus sat down, settling the baby more comfortably. "Tell me about this investigator," he said calmly. Elena stopped pacing. "Richard Vaughn, ex-FBI, runs a firm that does family recovery for wealthy clients. He's the one who found my aunt's address, who's been watching us. And he knows about your grandmother's Oregon cabin." "I don't know. Maybe. Grandmother left it to me in her will, so there's a paper trail." Eleanor sank into the chair across from Marcus. "I thought I was being smart, having a destination he couldn't predict, but now you're thinking like prey instead of someone fighting for her child." Elena's eyes flashed. "Easy for you to say. You're not the one with everything to lose." Gabriel reached toward his mother, making soft sounds of concern. Marcus stood and carried him to Elena, who took him with shaking hands. "You're right," Marcus said quietly. "I don't have anything to lose. But that also means I can think clearly about solutions while you're focused on threats." "What solutions? Run again? Keep running until Gabriel grows up thinking normal life is looking over your shoulder and never staying anywhere long enough to call it home? Or stand and fight?" Elena looked up at him. "With what weapons? Against their lawyers and investigators and endless money?" Marcus moved to the mantelpiece, retrieving a legal document from behind the clock. "With this," he handed her the papers. Marriage license applications he'd driven down to Pine Ridge to collect 2 days before the storm hit. Elena stared at them, recognizing what they represented. "You already? When did you?" "The day before yesterday. I had a feeling the weather was turning and wanted to have options ready." Marcus sat back down. "Colorado has a 3-day waiting period, but Judge Morrison owes me a favor. He'd waive it under emergency circumstances." Elena's hands trembled as she read through the forms. "You were that certain I'd say yes? I was that certain you needed choices beyond running and hiding. Gabriel had discovered the papers and was reaching for them with both hands, babbling commentary on this interesting development. Eleanor shifted him away from the documents, while her mind processed the implications. A marriage license stops David. How exactly? Gives you legal standing as my wife. Gabriel becomes my stepson with legal rights to inherit this ranch. Any custody challenge has to go through Colorado courts instead of Denver family court, where David's connections run deep. And if that doesn't work? Marcus was quiet for a moment, watching Gabriel attempt to grab the papers. Then we make sure Gabriel's safety is protected by any means necessary. Something in his tone made Elena look up sharply. What does that mean? It means I know these mountains better than any outside investigator. It means I have friends who ask a few questions and offer help when it's needed. It means David Restrepo might find that his money and connections don't carry the same weight up here. Elena studied Marcus's face, seeing something harder beneath his usual calm demeanor. You're talking about illegal things. I'm talking about protecting a child from people who would use him as a weapon against his mother. Gabriel had given up on the papers and was now exploring Marcus's shirt buttons with intense concentration. The domestic scene contrasted sharply with the conversation happening above his head. If we did this, Elena said slowly, if we actually got married, what happens when David challenges it? Claims it's a sham, that I'm using you to avoid custody orders. Then we prove it's real. How? Marcus looked down at Gabriel, who had successfully unbuttoned his shirt pocket and was now investigating its contents. By living like it's real, shared bank accounts, joint ownership of property, legal adoption papers for Gabriel, full commitment to building a life together. Elena was quiet for several minutes, Gabriel providing a soundtrack of discovery and delight as he explored his new favorite person. There's something else, she said finally. Something I haven't told you about, David. Marcus waited, sensing the importance of what was coming. He doesn't just want Gabriel back for control or revenge. His family's been pushing him to run for state legislature, maybe higher office eventually. A custody battle, especially one where he's painted as the responsible parent rescuing his child from an unstable mother. It would generate the kind of publicity his campaign advisors love, using Gabriel as a campaign prop. Exactly, the devoted father fighting for his son's welfare against a woman who kidnapped his child and ran off with a stranger. Eleanor's voice was bitter. They'd turn our marriage into evidence of my poor judgment, my desperation, my willingness to expose Gabriel to unknown men. Gabriel had located a pen in Marcus's pocket and was now attempting to write on his own hand with it. Marcus gently retrieved the pen, replacing it with a wooden teething ring that immediately went into Gabriel's mouth. Unless, Marcus said thoughtfully, we control the narrative instead of letting them write it. How? By being completely transparent. Open records, character witnesses, documentation of Gabriel's well-being and development. Make it impossible for them to paint you as unstable or me as a threat. Elena shifted Gabriel to her other arm, considering. That's risky. Opens us up to scrutiny. Everything's risky at this point. Question is, which risks serve Gabriel's interests and which serve David's? The radio crackled again, this time with local news rather than weather. Elena tensed as the announcer's voice filled the cabin. Denver police have issued an Amber Alert for 7-month-old Gabriel Restrepo, believed to be with his mother, Elena Rodriguez. The child was allegedly taken from his authorized residence in violation of court-ordered custody arrangements. Anyone with information should contact... Elena went white, clutching Gabriel so tightly he began to protest. They're calling it kidnapping. Marcus reached over and turned off the radio. It's not kidnapping when a mother protects her child. The law doesn't see it that way. Courts issued temporary custody to David pending the hearing. By taking Gabriel and leaving the state, I've violated those orders. Elena's voice cracked. I've made everything worse. Gabriel had begun crying again, responding to his mother's distress. This time, when Marcus reached for him, Elena shook her head. No, we need to. She stood abruptly, still holding Gabriel. I have to turn myself in. Maybe if I go back, explain that I was scared, that I made a mistake. Elena, stop. They'll be more lenient if I surrender voluntarily. Maybe I can still prove I'm a fit mother, that Gabriel belongs with me. And maybe David's people will make sure you never get another chance to run. Elena froze at the implication in his words. What do you mean? Marcus stood as well, his expression grim. I mean, women who challenge powerful men sometimes have accidents. Sometimes they're found incompetent to stand trial. Sometimes they simply disappear into the system and their children grow up believing their mothers abandoned them. You're being paranoid. Am I? Your ex-husband threatened you directly. His investigator has resources and no oversight. His family has political connections and unlimited money. Marcus stepped closer. What exactly makes you think they'll play? Fair now that you've embarrassed them publicly? Gabriel's crying had subsided to exhausted whimpers. Elena bounced him automatically, while her mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. So what do you suggest? That we ignore the Amber Alert and pretend this will just go away? I suggest we move forward with the marriage immediately. Today. Create legal facts on the ground before David's people can interfere. Elena stared at him. Today? Judge Morrison can perform the ceremony this afternoon. We file the papers, establish legal residence, and begin adoption proceedings for Gabriel. By tomorrow, you're Elena Hawthorne, and Gabriel is my stepson with all the legal protections that provides. And if David challenges it, let him try. Fighting a custody case is different when you're challenging a stable two-parent home versus pursuing a single mother on the run. Gabriel had fallen asleep against Elena's shoulder, finally overcome by the emotional exhaustion of the morning. Elena looked down at his peaceful face, then back at Marcus. This is insane, probably. We're talking about permanent legal marriage to someone I met 4 days ago. We're talking about giving Gabriel the protection he needs, and you, the legal, standing to fight for him. Eleanor walked to the window, looking out at the snow-covered landscape that had become both sanctuary and trap. What if it doesn't work? What if they find some way to challenge the marriage, take Gabriel anyway? Marcus joined her at the window. Then at least we'll have tried everything legal first. And after that? After that, we protect him by whatever means necessary. The implications of that statement hung in the air between them. Eleanor looked down at Gabriel, sleeping trustingly in her arms, and felt the weight of every decision she'd made that had led to this moment. If we do this, she said quietly, if we actually go through with it, there's no going back, for any of us. Some bridges are meant to be burned. Elena was quiet for a long time, watching snow melt in patches where the morning sun hit it directly. Gabriel slept on, unaware that his future was being decided in the silence of a mountain cabin. All right, she said finally. Call Judge Morrison. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, relief, determination, and something deeper that he wasn't quite ready to name. You're sure? Elena looked at him with clear eyes. I'm sure that Gabriel deserves better than spending his childhood as a pawn in his father's political games. I'm sure that running hasn't solved anything and fighting alone isn't working. She paused. And I'm sure that if I have to trust someone with our lives, I'd rather it be the man who opened his door to strangers in a storm than the one who sees his own son as a liability. Marcus nodded and reached for his phone. Time to make some calls and burn some bridges. Outside, the sun climbed higher, melting snow and opening roads. Change was coming whether they were ready or not. At least now they would face it together. The phone call came at 2:30 in the afternoon, just as Marcus was loading Gabriel's car seat into his pickup truck for the drive to Judge Morrison's office. Elena froze at the sound of the ringtone. Gabriel balanced on her hip, wearing the closest thing to formal clothes they could improvise from Marcus's spare clothing. Marcus glanced at the caller ID, and his expression darkened. "Sheriff Brennan!" Eleanor's face went white. "Don't answer it. If I don't, he'll just drive up here." Marcus accepted the call. "Tom, what can I do for you?" Eleanor could hear only Marcus's side of the conversation, but his increasingly tense responses told the story clearly enough. "Is that right? When did they arrive?" "I see." "No, Tom. I appreciate you calling first." Gabriel sensed the adult tension and began fussing, reaching for Marcus while making distressed sounds. Eleanor bounced him gently, but her own anxiety was feeding his distress. "Give me 20 minutes, Marcus continued. "I'll meet you at the bottom of my access road, because I'd prefer to keep this civil, and my property stays my property until you have a warrant." He ended the call and immediately began moving with purposeful efficiency. "Sheriff's got a federal agent and David's investigator with him. They're requesting permission to search the ranch for you and Gabriel." Elena's knees nearly buckled. "They found us." "Not yet. Tom Brennan's been sheriff here for 15 years, and he doesn't like outsiders telling him how to do his job. He's giving us a heads up because he owes me favors, and he doesn't trust federal agents who show up with private investigators. But they know we're here. They know your car was found abandoned on the county road leading to this area. They're checking every ranch within a 10-mile radius." Marcus grabbed his truck keys and jacket. "Which means we have maybe an hour before they start going door to door with or without cooperation." Gabriel had escalated to full crying now, picking up on the fear and urgency surrounding him. Elena tried to comfort him while her mind raced through impossible options. "We can't run. They'll be watching all the roads." "We're not running." Marcus lifted Gabriel from Eleanor's arms, and the baby's crying immediately subsided to hiccups. "We're getting married. Now. With federal agents. Looking for us. Especially now." Marcus handed Gabriel back to Elena and pulled out his phone. "Judge Morrison, it's Marcus Hawthorne. Yes, I know it's short notice, but we have an emergency situation." "No, sir. The federal kind of emergency." Elena listened to Marcus explain their situation in careful terms while Gabriel clung to her shirt, still unsettled by the morning's tension. Through the window, she could see dark clouds gathering on the horizon, another storm system moving in. 30 minutes, Marcus said, ending the call. "Judge Morrison's office is 20 minutes from here if we take the back roads. He'll perform the ceremony and file the papers immediately. And if the sheriff comes here while we're gone, then he finds an empty house and has to keep looking." Marcus checked his watch. "But if we're married when they find us, everything changes legally." Elena looked down at Gabriel, who had finally calmed, but was watching her with those serious dark eyes that seemed to understand more than a 7-month-old should. "What if this doesn't work? What if David's lawyers find a way to challenge it anyway? Then we'll deal with that when it happens. Right now, we change the facts they have to work with." Marcus helped Elena into the truck, securing Gabriel's car seat with practiced efficiency. As they pulled away from the cabin, Elena took what might be her last look at the place that had given them sanctuary for 5 days. "I'm scared," she admitted as they navigated the winding mountain road. "Good. Fear keeps you sharp." Marcus downshifted around a tight curve. "But don't let it make decisions for you." The drive to Pine Ridge took them through terrain Elena hadn't seen before, dense forest giving way to rolling meadows, then back to rocky outcroppings that spoke of ancient geological violence. Gabriel dozed in his car seat, lulled by the truck's movement, and apparently deciding that if the adults were handling things, he could rest. Tell me about Judge Morrison, Eleanor said, needing distraction from watching the rearview mirrors for pursuing vehicles. Harvey Morrison's been a family friend for 20 years. He married my parents, buried my grandfather, and handled the legal work when I took over the ranch. Marcus negotiated another curve. He's also the one who finalized my divorce from Sarah. Will he ask questions about the circumstances? Harvey's seen enough of life to know that sometimes people need help first and explanations second. They reached Pine Ridge as the first fat snowflakes began falling from the darkening sky. The town was small, maybe 3,000 people scattered, around a main street that could have been lifted from a postcard. Judge Morrison's office occupied the second floor of a brick building that also housed the town's only law firm and a dental practice. Elena climbed the narrow stairs with Gabriel, while Marcus carried the car seat and diaper bag they'd hastily packed. Her legs felt unsteady, whether from nerves or the unreality of what they were about to do. Judge Morrison was waiting in his chambers, a man in his 70s with kind eyes and the weathered hands of someone who'd worked outdoors before becoming a judge. He looked from Marcus to Elena to Gabriel with the practiced assessment of someone accustomed to complicated situations. "Well," he said, "this is certainly irregular." "Emergency circumstances, Harvey," Marcus replied. "We need legal protection immediately." Judge Morrison studied Elena for a moment. "Young lady, I need to ask you directly. Are you entering this marriage of your own free will?" "Yes, sir." "And you understand that marriage is a legal contract with significant obligations and consequences?" Elena shifted Gabriel to her other arm. "I understand. Are you currently married to anyone else?" "Divorced. Final decree 18 months ago." Judge Morrison nodded and turned to Marcus. "And you, Marcus? Free will and full understanding?" "Yes, Harvey." "Any legal impediments to this marriage?" "None." Judge Morrison moved to his desk, pulling out official forms. "I'll need to see identification from both of you, and we'll need 2 witnesses." "Witnesses?" Elena's heart sank. "We don't have—" "My clerk can serve as one," Judge Morrison said kindly, "and Deputy Martinez is downstairs handling some paperwork. She owes me a favor." 20 minutes later, Elena Rodriguez stood beside Marcus, Hawthorne in Judge Morrison's chambers, holding Gabriel, while Deputy Martinez and the court clerk watched from nearby chairs. The ceremony was brief, practical, focused on legal requirements rather than romantic declarations. "Do you, Marcus William Hawthorne, take Elena Maria Rodriguez to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "Do you, Elena Maria Rodriguez, take Marcus William Hawthorne to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Elena looked at Gabriel, then at Marcus, then back at the judge. "I do. By the power vested in me by the state of Colorado, I now pronounce you husband and wife." Judge Morrison signed the certificate with an official flourish, then handed it to his clerk for immediate filing. "Mrs. Hawthorne, congratulations. Mr. Hawthorne, take care of your family." The title, Mrs. Hawthorne, hit Elena like a physical thing. In the space of 15 minutes, she'd gone from fugitive to married woman, from single mother to part of a legally recognized family unit. Gabriel chose that moment to say his second word clearly, "Today," reaching for Marcus with both arms. The timing was so perfect that Deputy Martinez laughed out loud. "Well, that's settled then." Marcus took Gabriel, who immediately began exploring his shirt pocket, a ritual that had become their special interaction. Elena watched them together and felt something shift in her chest, a recognition that this arrangement might be based on practical necessity, but it was building on something real. "Marcus," Judge Morrison said quietly, "whatever trouble's following you folks, you handle it legally and properly. Always do, Harvey. See that you continue to." They were back in the truck and heading home when Elena's phone rang. She'd turned it off for days, but had powered it up that morning to check for any urgent messages. Now she stared at the caller ID with growing dread. "It's David," Marcus glanced at the phone. Answer it. What? You're not hiding anymore. You're a married woman with legal standing. Answer the phone. Elena's hand trembled as she accepted the call. Hello, David. Elena. David's voice was cold, controlled fury barely held in check. I think we need to talk. I don't think we have anything to discuss. You have my son. I have our son. Elena surprised herself with the steadiness of her own voice. Where I've always had him. You violated a court order. You kidnapped Gabriel and fled across state lines. Do you have any idea what kind of legal trouble you're in? Gabriel, hearing his father's voice for the first time in weeks, looked confused, but not distressed. Whatever emotional connection he'd once had to David seemed to have faded. I protected Gabriel from a situation that wasn't safe for him. David's laugh was harsh. Safe? You dragged an infant across 3 states in winter weather to hide out with some stranger you picked up. How exactly is that protecting him? The stranger is my husband. Silence on the other end of the line. Elena could practically hear David recalculating his approach. Husband? His voice was carefully controlled now. Elena, what have you done? I got married, David. Today. Legally and properly, with witnesses and official documents. To who? Elena looked at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. Marcus Hawthorne. We're living on his ranch in Colorado. You've known this man for what? A week? And you married him? Elena, this just proves what I've been saying about your mental state. What it proves is that I've found someone who puts Gabriel's welfare before his own convenience. Gabriel had begun fussing again, and Marcus pulled over to the side of the road. Elena realized her own tension was affecting the baby, and she consciously tried to relax her voice. David, Gabriel is happy, healthy and safe. He's in a stable 2-parent home with people who love him. People? Elena, you married a complete stranger. You have no idea what kind of man he is, what his background includes, or whether he's safe around children. He's safer than... Elena caught herself before finishing the sentence. Safer than what? His own father. Marcus held out his hand for the phone. Elena looked at him questioningly, and he mouthed, Trust me. David, this is Marcus Hawthorne. Elena could hear David's voice rise, though not the specific words. Marcus's responses were calm, measured. That's right, Elena's husband. No, David, I think you misunderstand the situation. Because Gabriel is my stepson now, and I take that responsibility. Seriously? I understand you're upset, but threats aren't going to change the legal facts. Gabriel had calmed again, apparently reassured by Marcus's steady tone. Elena watched this man she'd known for less than a week take on her ex-husband with quiet confidence. The thing is, David, you're going to have to decide what's really important to you. Is it Gabriel's welfare or is it winning? Because those might not be the same thing. No, I don't think you understand what you're up against here. Elena could hear David's voice getting louder, more aggressive. Marcus's expression never changed. Here's what's going to happen. You can file whatever legal challenges you want. But you'll be fighting a stable married couple in Colorado courts, not chasing a single mother across state lines. And you'll be doing it while we document every day how happy and healthy Gabriel is in his new home. That's your choice to make. Marcus ended the call and handed the phone back to Elena. He's angry. Furious, Elena confirmed, but also calculating. David's always been at his most dangerous when he's thinking instead of just reacting. What did he mean about not understanding? What we're up against? Marcus started the truck again, pulling back onto the road. Probably that he's got lawyers and money and connections we don't have. Do you think he's right? I think he's about to learn that money and connections work differently in small towns than they do in cities. Gabriel had fallen asleep again, exhausted by the day's emotions and changes. Elena watched the snow falling heavier now, adding another layer of complications to an already complex situation. Marcus, what have we done? What we had to do? But what if... Elena. Marcus's voice was gentle but firm. We just made Gabriel legally my son. We changed every equation David was working with. Whatever comes next, we face it as a family. The word family settled into the truck cab like warm air. Elena looked at her sleeping son, then at the man who had just promised to protect them both, and realized that despite everything, the fear, the uncertainty, the impossible circumstances, she felt safer than she had in months. The snow was falling harder as they turned up the access road to the ranch. In the distance, Elena could see lights that didn't belong, vehicles parked near their cabin. "They're already here," she said. Marcus checked his watch. "Right on schedule." "Good thing. We beat them to the courthouse. What do we do now?" Marcus reached over and squeezed her hand. "Now we go home and introduce them to the Hawthorne family." As they approached the cabin, Elena could see Sheriff Brennan's vehicle, along with two other cars. One clearly a government issue, the other expensive and out of place in the mountain setting. "Remember," Marcus said quietly, "you're Elena Hawthorne now. Gabriel is my stepson. We're a family and this is our home." Elena nodded, clutching the marriage certificate like a shield. Whatever was waiting for them in those official vehicles, they would face it together. The real test was about to begin. Sheriff Tom Brennan stood beside his patrol car as Marcus's truck approached the cabin, his weathered face carefully neutral. Behind him, two other men waited, one in a federal agent's standard-issue suit that looked absurdly formal against the mountain backdrop, the other wearing expensive outdoor gear that screamed city money, trying to blend in. Marcus parked beside the official vehicles and turned off the engine. In the sudden quiet, Gabriel stirred awake, blinking at the unfamiliar scene through the truck windows. "Remember what we discussed," Marcus said quietly to Elena. "You're my wife. Gabriel is my stepson. This is our home." Elena nodded, adjusting, Gabriel in her arms. The marriage certificate was folded carefully in her jacket pocket, along with Judge Morrison's business card. Legal armor for the battle ahead. Sheriff Brennan approached the truck as they climbed out, his expression apologetic but determined. "Marcus, Elena, sorry to bother you folks, but I've got some questions that need answering." "Tom." Marcus nodded, respectfully. "Appreciate you coming up here personally instead of sending deputies." "Well, these gentlemen insisted on federal cooperation." Brennan gestured toward his companions. "Agent Cartwright from the FBI and Mr. Vaughn, private investigator." Agent Cartwright stepped forward, flashing credentials with practiced efficiency. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I need you to understand that you're in violation of federal kidnapping statutes. If you cooperate now—" "Mrs. Hawthorne," Elena corrected quietly. Cartwright paused, confusion flickering across his features. "Excuse me?" Elena held up her left hand, showing the simple gold band Marcus had produced during the ceremony, his grandmother's ring, resized hastily by Pine Ridge's only jeweler. "Elena Hawthorne. I got married this afternoon." Richard Vaughn, the private investigator, stepped closer. He was smaller than Elena had expected from David's descriptions, but there was something predatory in his movement that made her skin crawl. "Married to whom?" Vaughn's voice carried the tone of someone accustomed to intimidation. "To me," Marcus said, moving slightly so he stood between Vaughn and Elena. "Marcus Hawthorne. This is my ranch, and Elena is my wife." Gabriel, sensing adult tension, began fussing and reaching for Marcus. Without hesitation, Marcus took him, settling the baby against his shoulder, where Gabriel immediately relaxed. Agent Cartwright was rapidly recalculating the situation. "When did this alleged marriage take place?" "This afternoon. Judge Morrison's office in Pine Ridge." Elena produced the marriage certificate, hands steady despite her racing heart. "All legal and properly documented." Vaughn snatched the certificate. Before Agent Cartwright could take it, scanning the document with practiced eyes, his expression darkened as he read. This is convenient timing, Mrs. Hawthorne, Vaughan said, making her new name sound like an accusation. Marrying a stranger just hours before law enforcement arrives to enforce custody orders. I didn't marry a stranger, Elena replied calmly. I married the man who's been caring for Gabriel and me for the past week. The man Gabriel calls Dada. As if on cue, Gabriel looked at Marcus and repeated his new word clearly. Dada. Sheriff Brennan's weathered face creased into what might have been a smile. Seems like the boys made his feelings clear. Agent Cartwright wasn't amused. A rushed marriage doesn't change the underlying custody violations. Mrs. Rodriguez, Hawthorne, you still removed the child from Colorado in violation of court orders. Actually, Marcus said, we never left. Colorado. Elena's been here on my ranch since her car broke down in the storm 5 days ago. And you just happened to fall in love and decide to get married at that time? Vaughan's tone dripped with skepticism. Marcus met the investigator's stare directly. Sometimes people recognize what matters when everything else is stripped away. Gabriel had discovered Marcus's coat zipper and was conducting a detailed investigation of its workings. The domestic scene, father and son exploring simple mysteries, together contrasted sharply with the official tension surrounding them. Mr. Hawthorne, Agent Cartwright said, I need to inform you that harboring a fugitive is a federal offense. Good thing I married her then, Marcus replied evenly. It's hard to harbor your own wife. Eleanor watched this exchange with growing amazement. Marcus faced down federal authority with the same calm confidence he brought to everything else, as if powerful men making threats were just another type of weather to endure. Vaughan pulled out his phone, stepping away from the group. Elena caught fragments of his conversation, David's name, legal challenges, emergency motions, the machinery of wealth and influence grinding into motion. Mrs. Hawthorne, Agent Cartwright continued, regardless of your marital status there, are still questions about Gabriel's welfare. Living in isolation with a man you barely know, removing him from proper medical care. Gabriel has excellent medical care, Eleanor interrupted. Dr. Patterson in Pine Ridge has been monitoring his development since we arrived. His weight is up, his milestones are on track, and he's happier than he's been in months. Sheriff Brennan looked genuinely interested. Doc Patterson's been seeing the baby twice this week, Marcus confirmed. Full checkups, immunization review, nutritional assessment. Doc says Gabriel's thriving. Elena saw the shift in Sheriff Brennan's expression. Dr. Patterson was clearly someone whose opinion carried weight in this community. Vaughan finished his phone call and rejoined the group, his expression triumphant. Mr. Restrepo is filing emergency. Motions to invalidate this marriage on grounds of fraud and coercion. He's also requesting immediate federal intervention to recover his son. Let him file, Marcus said calmly. He'll be fighting those motions in Colorado State Court, where judges tend to value children's welfare over political connections. You have no idea who you're dealing with, Vaughan snarled, his professional facade slipping. The Restrepo family has resources you can't imagine, and you have no idea where you are, Marcus replied. This isn't Denver. Up here, a man's word still matters more than his bank account. Gabriel had grown bored with the zipper and was now babbling commentary on the conversation, small hands patting Marcus's chest for emphasis. His complete comfort with Marcus was impossible to fake or dismiss. Agent Cartwright was clearly uncomfortable with the direction things were taking. Sheriff Brennan, what's your assessment of the child's welfare? Sheriff Brennan studied Gabriel, who was now playing peekaboo with Elena around Marcus's shoulder. The child looks healthy, happy, well cared for. Parents seem devoted to him. Parents? Vaughan exploded. That man isn't the child's parent. He's the child's legal stepfather as of this afternoon, Elena said firmly, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. Gabriel chose that moment to fall asleep again, small body going limp against Marcus's chest in the complete trust that only comes with genuine security. Marcus adjusted his hold automatically, one hand supporting Gabriel's head with practiced care. "Agent Cartwright," Sheriff Brennan said, "I'm not seeing evidence of endangerment or neglect here. Children clearly bonded to both adults, appearing healthy and content. But the custody orders are civil matters for family court to sort out, not federal crimes requiring immediate intervention." Vaughn stepped forward aggressively. "This is interference with a federal investigation." Sheriff Brennan's expression hardened. "This is a sheriff determining that no crimes are being committed in his jurisdiction. We'll see what your superiors say about that." "You're welcome to call Governor Peterson," Brennan replied mildly. "He's my second cousin. We went to school together." Elena saw Vaughn's confidence falter slightly. The network of connections that worked so well in cities had different patterns in small communities. Agent Cartwright seemed eager to diffuse the situation. "Mrs. Hawthorne, would you be willing to voluntarily appear in Denver to address the custody concerns?" "As long as my husband can accompany me, Gabriel remains in our custody throughout any proceedings. That's the only way I'm leaving this ranch voluntarily," Elena said firmly. "Gabriel stays with his family." Vaughn was making another phone call, his voice increasingly frustrated as he explained the situation to whoever was on the other end. Elena caught the words "political implications" and "public relations disaster." "Problem, Mr. Vaughn?" Marcus asked mildly. Vaughn ended his call with obvious anger. "Mr. Restrepo is reassessing the situation." Meaning a custody battle against a stable two-parent family doesn't generate the kind of publicity his campaign advisors were hoping for. Elena felt a surge of vindication. David's political calculations were working against him now that the aid narrative had changed. "So what happens next?" Agent Cartwright asked, clearly wanting to resolve the situation. Sheriff Brennan looked at his watch. "Next, these federal agents and their private investigator head back down the mountain before. This evening's storm makes the roads impassable again." As if summoned by his words, snow began falling more heavily. Elena looked up at the sky and realized they were about to be snowed in again, this time as a legally married family. "Mrs. Hawthorne," Agent Cartwright said, "you should know that Mr. Restrepo may pursue this through other legal channels." "Let him," Elena replied. "Gabriel and I aren't hiding anymore." Vaughn made one final attempt at intimidation. "This isn't over. The Restrepo family doesn't forget its enemies." Marcus stepped closer to the investigator, Gabriel still sleeping, peacefully in his arms. "Mr. Vaughn, I want you to listen very carefully. If anyone threatens my family, my wife, my son, they'll discover that mountain folks have long memories too, and we protect what's ours." The quiet menace in Marcus's voice was more effective than any shouting. Vaughn actually stepped backward. "Are you threatening a federal investigation? I'm informing you that Gabriel is my son now, legally and in every way that matters. Anyone who tries to hurt him will have to go through me first." Sheriff Brennan cleared his throat. "Gentlemen, I suggest we call this a successful welfare check and head back to town before the weather gets worse." Agent Cartwright nodded reluctantly. "Mrs. Hawthorne, you'll need to appear in court when these custody matters are resolved." "I'll be there," Elena promised, "with my husband and son." As the official vehicles prepared to leave, Vaughn made one last approach to Elena. "You think you've won something here? David won't give up. He'll find other ways." Elena looked at Gabriel sleeping trustingly in Marcus's arms, then at the man who had just faced down federal agents to protect them both. "Maybe he will," she said, quietly. "But I'm not the same woman who ran away in a snowstorm. I'm Elena Hawthorne now. I have a family, a home, and legal standing. If David wants a fight, he'll get one." Vaughan's expression suggested he was beginning to understand that the game had changed completely. The convoy of official vehicles disappeared down the mountain road just as the snow began falling in earnest. Elena stood on the porch beside Marcus, watching their taillights fade into the gathering storm. "Think they'll be back?" she asked. Marcus adjusted Gabriel, who was waking up as the excitement ended. "Eventually. But next time they come, they'll be dealing with an established family, not fugitives." Gabriel looked around at the snowy landscape with bright, curious eyes, completely unconcerned by the drama that had just unfolded around him. In his world, he was safe with the people who loved him, and that was all that mattered. "Dada," Gabriel said again, patting Marcus's cheek with one small hand. "That's right, buddy," Marcus said softly. "Dada's here." Elena felt tears threaten as she watched them together. "I can't believe it worked." "It worked because it's real," Marcus replied. "Gabriel knows who his family is. Everyone else can see it too." Inside the warm cabin, they settled into their evening routine, the three of them moving around each other with increasing comfort and familiarity. Gabriel played on the floor while Eleanor prepared dinner and Marcus tended the fire. "Marcus," Eleanor said eventually, "what David said about not knowing what we're up against, do you think he'll really try to find other ways to cause trouble?" Marcus considered the question while Gabriel showed him a wooden block with intense seriousness. "Probably, but he'll be fighting uphill now. Public opinion, legal precedent, Gabriel's obvious well-being, it all works in our favor. And if he gets desperate, then we handle it when it happens, together." Gabriel had moved on to investigating the fascinating world under the kitchen table, babbling commentary on his discoveries. Elena watched him explore with fearless curiosity and realized that for the first time in months she wasn't constantly watching for threats or planning escape routes. "Elena," Marcus said quietly, "there's something I need you to know." She looked up from the vegetables she was chopping, noting the serious tone in his voice. "Whatever started this marriage, necessity, protection, legal strategy, it doesn't have to stay that way if you don't want it to." Elena's hands still on the cutting board. "What do you mean?" "I mean when the legal dust settles, when Gabriel's safe and David's given up, you'll have choices. This can be a real marriage if that's what you want, or it can be a partnership focused on raising Gabriel, or it can end altogether once you're established here." Elena looked at Gabriel, now trying to fit his entire fist into his mouth while conducting serious business with a wooden spoon. Then she looked at Marcus, this man who had opened his home and heart to strangers and somehow made them into a family. "What do you want?" she asked. Marcus met her eyes directly. "I want whatever makes you and Gabriel happiest. I want to wake up every morning hearing him babble in his crib and you humming in the kitchen. I want to teach him to ride horses and help with cattle and respect the land." Gabriel had abandoned his spoon investigation and was now attempting to climb Marcus's leg with determination that bordered on heroic. Marcus lifted him easily, settling the baby on his lap, where Gabriel immediately began exploring shirt pockets. "Again, I want to be the man he calls Dada for the rest of his life," Marcus continued, "but I want you to choose that freely, not because you're trapped by circumstances." Elena watched them together, Gabriel's complete trust, Marcus's natural tenderness, the easy rhythm they'd developed. "What if I choose all of it?" "All of it? Real marriage, real family, real partnership in everything?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, studying her face. "Are you sure?" Elena moved to where they sat, placing her hand over Marcus's where it rested on Gabriel's back. "I'm sure that Gabriel is happier than he's ever been. I'm sure that I feel safer with you than I've felt in years. I'm sure that what we've built here in less than a week is more real than anything I had in 3 years with David." Gabriel looked up at both adults, then broke into the brilliant smile that had become his signature response to family moments. "Mama, Dada," he said clearly, as if offering his own opinion on the matter. Elena laughed, the sound bright with relief and joy. "Well, that settles it then." Outside, snow continued falling, blanketing the mountain in fresh silence. Inside the cabin, a family settled into evening routines that felt like they'd been practiced for years instead of days. The storm that had brought them together was over. The new life they were building together was just beginning. 6 months later, Elena stood at the kitchen window watching Gabriel take his first unsteady steps across the cabin's wooden floor toward Marcus, who knelt with arms outstretched and a grin that could have powered the ranch for a week. "Come on, buddy," Marcus encouraged. "You can do it." Gabriel had been pulling himself up to standing for weeks now, cruising along furniture with increasing confidence. But this morning, something had shifted. He'd simply let go of the coffee table and taken 3 wobbling steps before sitting, down hard on his bottom with a look of surprise. Now, 10 minutes later, he was walking in earnest, 5 steps, then 6, then 7, before tumbling into Marcus's waiting arms with delighted laughter that filled every corner of the cabin. "Did you see that?" Elena called Marcus, though she'd been watching the entire time. 7 steps. "I counted 8, Marcus replied, lifting Gabriel high in the air. "This boy's going to be running by next week." Gabriel squealed with joy at the impromptu airplane ride, small hands reaching toward the ceiling beams. At 13 months old, he'd grown sturdy and confident, his dark hair now long enough to curl at the edges, his vocabulary expanding daily. Beyond mama and dada, to include moo for the cattle, up, his most frequent demand, and more, applicable to food, attention, and any activity he found entertaining. Elena wiped flour from her hands. She'd been making bread, a skill. She'd learned from Mrs. Patterson in town and joined them on the floor. Gabriel immediately wanted to demonstrate his new ability again, taking careful steps between his parents with the focused concentration of someone mastering great art. The morning light, streaming through the windows, illuminated changes throughout the cabin. Elena's touches were everywhere now. Curtains she'd sewn, from fabric purchased in Pine Ridge, photographs of Gabriel at various stages of development, a small herb garden thriving on the windowsill. Marcus's grandmother's furniture had been joined by a proper high chair, toys scattered in corners, and the controlled chaos that comes with an active toddler. The legal battles had taken 4 months to fully resolve. David's initial challenges to their marriage had failed spectacularly when Judge Morrison testified about the ceremony's legitimacy, and Dr. Patterson provided detailed documentation of Gabriel's excellent health and development. The adoption, papers making Gabriel legally Marcus's son, had been finalized just last week, signed by a family court judge who noted that rarely had she seen a child so clearly thriving in his placement. David's political ambitions had suffered considerably from the prolonged custody battle. Local media had not been kind to a man who seemed more interested in using his son as a campaign prop than ensuring the child's welfare. The final blow came when Gabriel's court-appointed guardian ad litem submitted a report describing the boy's obvious attachment to Marcus and his flourishing development on the ranch. David had eventually agreed to supervised visitation rights, 2 hours every other weekend, at a neutral location in Denver, with the understanding that Gabriel would remain with the Hawthorne family. The visits had been awkward affairs from the start, with Gabriel showing little interest in the man who insisted on being called father, and much more enthusiasm for the toys in the visitation center. 3 weeks ago, David had simply stopped showing up. His lawyer had filed paperwork officially terminating his parental rights, citing changed priorities and the child's clear preference for his adoptive placement. Elena suspected the real reason was that Gabriel's shy politeness toward David, compared to his exuberant joy with Marcus, made for terrible optics during an election year. Elena, Marcus said, interrupting her thoughts. We should probably start thinking about child-proofing the upper cabinets. Gabriel had discovered that walking opened up entire new areas for exploration. He was currently investigating the fascinating world of pot lids with the systematic thoroughness of a scientist conducting important research. Already ordered safety latches from the hardware store, Elena replied. Mrs. Chen said her granddaughter went through the same phase. Everything becomes accessible once they're mobile. Mrs. Chen ran the general store in Pine Ridge and had become one of Elena's closest friends over the past months. The older woman had taken Gabriel under her wing immediately, teaching him to count in both English and Mandarin while Elena shopped for supplies. The transformation in Elena herself had been as dramatic as Gabriel's growth. The haunted wariness that had marked her arrival had given way to confidence and contentment. She'd started teaching piano lessons to children in Pine Ridge, driving down the mountain twice a week to give lessons at the community center. The small income supplemented the ranch's finances, but more importantly, it gave her a sense of purpose beyond motherhood. Marcus had flourished as well. Having Elena and Gabriel come home each evening had given new meaning to his work. He'd expanded the cattle operations slightly, invested in some improvements to the barn, and started planning longer-term projects that assumed a future filled with family life. Marcus, Elena said, settling beside him as Gabriel continued his kitchen exploration, I got a call from Sarah yesterday. Marcus looked surprised. His ex-wife had maintained polite distance since his remarriage, sending a congratulatory card, but otherwise staying out of their lives. Everything okay? More than okay. She's pregnant, due in the fall. Marcus smiled. That's wonderful news. She'll be a good mother. Elena studied his face for any trace of regret or old pain. She found only genuine happiness for his former wife's good fortune. She asked if we'd be willing to let Gabriel play with her baby when they're older, said she'd love for them to know each other. What did you tell her? That Gabriel could always use more family connections, as long as everyone understands he's ours. Gabriel had discovered the fascinating properties of a wooden spoon against different surfaces, and was conducting an acoustic experiment that involved considerable enthusiasm, if not much musical talent. Speaking of family, Marcus said, I got news too. Tom Brennan's retiring next year. The town council's been asking if I'd consider running for sheriff. Elena turned to face him fully. Sheriff? Marcus, that's huge. It's also a big commitment. Would mean being away from the ranch more, dealing with county politics, handling situations that might not always be safe. Gabriel had tired of music making and was now attempting to climb into the cabinet under the sink. Elena intercepted him, redirecting his attention to a set of measuring cups that immediately became the most fascinating objects in his universe. What do you want to do? She asked. Marcus watched Gabriel stack the measuring cups with intense concentration. I want to make this community better for him to grow up in. Tom's done good work, but he's old school. Some situations need fresh approaches, like federal agents threatening local families, among other things. Marcus helped Gabriel when his tower of cups toppled over. There are other young families moving to the area, people looking for what we have here. They deserve protection and support. Elena felt a surge of pride watching Marcus consider how his choices would affect not just their family, but their entire community. This was the man she'd married, someone who thought beyond his own interests to consider the greater good. You'd be an excellent sheriff, she said simply. You think so? I know so. You're fair, you're brave, and you understand that protecting people sometimes means standing up to power. Gabriel had mastered the art of stacking 2 cups successfully and was now attempting a 3-cup tower with the focused determination that had become his signature approach to challenges. There's something else, Marcus said. If I ran for sheriff, if I won, we'd need to think about expanding our family sooner rather than later. Elena raised an eyebrow. Oh? Sheriff's a demanding job. Gabriel would benefit from having siblings. While he's young enough to really bond with them, Elena felt warmth spread through her chest. Are you asking what I think you're asking? Marcus helped Gabriel achieve his 3-cup tower, earning a squeal of delight from their son. I'm asking if you'd like to give Gabriel a little brother or sister. Gabriel chose that moment to knock down his tower with deliberate joy, then look at both parents expectantly for their reaction to his demolition skills. What do you think, Gabriel? Elena asked. Would you like a baby brother or sister? Gabriel clapped his hands and babbled something that might have been an agreement or might have been a request for snacks. It was impossible to tell with toddlers. I think that's a yes, Marcus interpreted. Elena laughed. I think you might be right. They spent the morning watching Gabriel explore his expanded world, marveling at how quickly he adapted to his new mobility. By noon, he'd investigated every accessible corner of the cabin, attempted to befriend the barn cat, who tolerated his advances with feline patience, and discovered that walking made carrying toys much more challenging, but infinitely more rewarding. After lunch, while Gabriel napped, Elena and Marcus sat on the porch watching clouds build over the distant peaks. Summer thunderstorms were common in the afternoons, brief but dramatic displays of nature's power. Do you ever regret it? Elena asked. Taking us that night? Marcus considered the question seriously. I regret that it took a crisis to bring us together. I regret the pain David caused you and Gabriel, but regret taking you in. Never. Elena leaned against his shoulder. Sometimes I can barely remember what life felt like before this place, before you. Different life, different person. Do you think Gabriel will remember any of it? The fear, the running, the uncertainty? Children are remarkably resilient. What he'll remember is feeling safe, loved, protected. That's what shapes how they see the world. A rumble of thunder rolled across the valley, still distant but promising afternoon drama. Elena watched the clouds build and felt no anxiety about incoming storms. She'd learned to trust that their home could weather whatever nature brought. Marcus, what made you so certain about us? That first night, when you could have just given us shelter and sent us on our way, what made you decide to get involved? Marcus was quiet for a moment, watching the approaching weather. You want the honest answer? Always. It was watching you with Gabriel, the way you held him, protected him, put his needs before your own safety. I saw someone who understood what love actually means: sacrifice, protection, putting someone else's welfare before your own. Thunder rumbled closer now, and the first fat raindrops began spattering the porch. Plus, Marcus added with a smile, Gabriel looked at me like he was sizing me up for the job of father. It seemed like I passed his interview. Elena laughed. He's always been a good judge of character. They moved inside as the storm arrived in earnest, rain drumming against the roof and windows, while lightning illuminated the valley in dramatic strobes. Gabriel slept through the thunder, exhausted by his morning of exploration and new achievements. That evening, as they settled into their routine, Gabriel's bath, story time, the gentle rituals that marked the end of each day, Elena reflected on how completely their lives had transformed. 6 months ago, she'd been a frightened woman running through a snowstorm with a baby she feared losing. Now she was Elena Hawthorne, wife and mother and valued member of a community, secure in a love that had grown from necessity into something deeper than she'd ever imagined possible. Gabriel went to sleep easily, worn out by his big day of walking and exploring. Elena tucked him in, while Marcus read him a story about farm animals, Gabriel's current obsession. The baby listened with sleepy attention, occasionally pointing at pictures and providing commentary in his expanding vocabulary. Moo, Gabriel said definitively when Marcus showed him the picture of a cow. That's right, buddy. Just like Bessie. Bay, Gabriel attempted, his version of their favorite cow's name. Later, after Gabriel was settled and the cabin had grown quiet, except for the settling sounds of old wood and dying fire, Elena and Marcus sat together planning their future. Sheriff's campaigns to consider, family expansions to plan, Gabriel's education to think about as he grew. "We should start looking into preschools in Pine Ridge," Elena said. "When he's ready, I want him to have friends his own age." "Not for a while yet," Marcus replied. "Let him be little for now." Elena curled against Marcus's side, listening to Gabriel's soft breathing from the bedroom and the gentle sounds of their mountain home settling into night. "Do you think we'll tell him the story someday? About the storm and how we met?" "When he's old enough to understand. He should know that sometimes the best things come from the worst circumstances, and that families can be made in many different ways. Especially that." Elena drifted off to sleep that night, thinking about tomorrow, Gabriel's continued adventures in walking, the bread she wanted to bake, the piano lesson with Mrs. Chen's granddaughter, who was showing real musical promise. Simple plans for an ordinary day in an extraordinary life. Outside, the mountains stood eternal and protective around their valley, sheltering the small cabin where 3 people had found what they'd each been searching for without knowing it. A man had found family to fill his empty spaces. A woman had found safety and partnership, and love deeper than fear. A child had found a father and home, and a secure foundation from which to explore the world. In the morning, Gabriel would take more steps, say new words, discover fresh wonders in his expanding universe. Elena would teach piano and tend her garden and continue building the life she'd never dared dream possible. Marcus would care for his cattle and consider his community service and watch his son grow with daily amazement. They would face whatever challenges came next, as they'd learned to face everything, together as a family, with the mountain's strength supporting them and love deeper than winter storms protecting them. The boy who'd said Dada for the first time in a stranger's arms would grow up knowing exactly who his family was and where he belonged. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind carried stories down from the peaks, he would hear the tale of the night when a storm brought 3 lonely people together and taught them that the strongest shelters are built not from wood and stone, but from choice and commitment and love that grows deeper with each passing day. In the end, Gabriel would understand that family isn't just about blood or marriage certificates or legal documents. It's about people who choose each other, who stay when leaving would be easier, who build something lasting from nothing more than hope and determination and the radical decision to love completely. The mountain remembers all stories, but this, one about the rancher who said that child stays here and meant it with his whole heart. This story would be remembered as long as the peak stood tall and the valley held safe the people brave enough to call it home. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.